Hello, I think we're live now. I will start by sharing my screen. So welcome to this session. It's kind of weird to just read it up and not actually see the response of people listening to it. But I hope you are hearing me and can see my slides. Fingers crossed. This session is called Continuously Building Tailor-Made Drupal Commerce While Still Being Open Source Friendly. It's helped by me. I work at a company called New Media. We specialize in building tailor-made Drupal commerce stores online. And this is what we're going to talk about today. I have an agenda to highlight different aspects of this topic. It's problems with open source and tailor-made solutions, and the fact that problems lead to consequences. We're going to look at some potential solutions to these problems and the end result. And hopefully that's the result with even more open source. So about me and my name is Erik. I'm a senior developer and technical team leader. These are some links to my social profiles and my email. And today I'm going to tell you a story actually. The story is about a company doing tailor-made Drupal commerce and how their choices ended up making them even more open source friendly. And this story is about Eric. He's a bearded web developer working at a company called New Medium. And he's completely anonymous, as you can see from the censored image. And I have, of course, changed his name for privacy reasons. And also the name and the logo of the company and where he works is purely fictional. And New Medium is a company that specializes in Drupal, and after several years of Ubercart and Commerce One, they are now building tailor-made stores based on Drupal Commerce 2 and Drupal 8, or put in another way, they're doing their business based on building on top of open source building blocks. And as we probably all know, doing that has some huge benefits of not having to implement all parts of a web application yourself. User authentication, for example, tax calculation is another. But doing this with open source components also comes with a cost that I think many companies find themselves having to face. And Eric here, he was facing this. New Medium, the company he works at, was facing this. So this brings us right into our first chapter of the agenda: problems with open source and tailor-made solutions. And first, we're going to talk about framework bending. Framework bending is something I will try to define in the following slide. But first, I'm going to kind of summarize what a typical e-commerce store for New Medium involved. And it's kind of boring and long, so I'm going to do it in just one breath. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Product import from one or many external sources, stock integration, some sort of integration with the physical store, third-party user authentication, loyalty programs, review solutions, digital downloads from content providers, order exports for ERP systems, and accounting reports. Okay, so that was the boring part, but the challenge here for New Medium was to avoid framework bending. And you can imagine implementing all of these things over and over again and dealing with what we call the Drupalisms, or battling against the framework. That means instead of making the tax calculation from scratch, they might have to do hacks and workarounds to make the existing tax system work like their tailor-made solution requires. Now, this is framework bending the framework so it fits their custom case. In many cases, this still saves time, but it can be quite frustrating. And these hacks and workarounds might end up having to be repeated for several projects. So there might be some copy pasting involved as well. And all of these hacks and workarounds might not be eligible to be committed to the core code base, since it makes the framework less flexible. And this leads to a problem which we will discuss in a minute, but just to add to the list of problems that the new medium was facing, some others include backwards incompatibility breaks when using open source components. And it could be frustrating when they actually contributed patches that the time from the bug report to the patch being committed could be quite long. So these three things combined, that is framework bending, breaking changes, slow or unresponsive patch workflow, leads to this dreaded problem, and it's a consequence that I'm talking about now, fork temptation. Fork temptation is the temptation to take the framework as is and make a copy of it, a so-called fork, and maintain this copy with open source framework yourself. In this copy, one might remove some flexibility to reduce the amount of framework bending. And this temptation is understandable, but as you probably have figured from the title of this talk, it's not the direction I want to promote here. And as I think most of us are actually in favor of open source patches on Drupal.org and Drupal in general, we'll not go into details on why forking or avoiding an open workflow is a bad thing. I think we all agree. So these are the things that Eric and his co-workers struggled with. And another potential consequence is to an attitude challenge in the company, or as part of the company culture, if you will. It can lead to a sort of ridiculing of open source processes. For example, that one might end up discussing a particular problem to death in the issue queue instead of committing to a solution, or so-called bike shedding. Or one can, for example, fear that doing things in the open might create bureaucracy for yourself, or that you have to be perfect. The code has to be perfect to publish it to Drupal.org. And all of these things, problems and consequences combined, make up the tailor-made solution dilemma. It's finding the right amount of open source while being able to deliver custom solutions in a sustainable way, and staying open with the cognitive load of framework bending and fork temptation. So those are all of the problems that they were facing. Let's go to some solutions. So Eric and New Medium recognized their problem or problems and set out to find solutions to the problems. So I'm going to divide this into two types of solutions: cultural solutions and technical solutions. Cultural solutions, in this case, refer to a company culture, or maybe we can call it an attitude, and almost in some cases a company policy about how to think about open source and the practices surrounding it. And there are different aspects of it, but I will touch on two things that Eric told me. The first thing is the level of flexibility and assumptions applied on these different levels. Because building tailor-made solution basically means being able to say yes to all the customizations that the client wants made to their e-commerce platform. This might lead to having many similar custom modules in different projects that maybe they differ in just wording, or things like prices displayed with tags, or maybe a custom 1000 separator. Now this sort of short customizations are quick to implement, but they create technical debt as the custom projects start to differ more and more, even if they contain very much similar code. So the important distinction to make here is the level of flexibility you put into every level of the project, or put another way, what kind of opinions are locked, so to speak, at which level. And here I have divided that into three different levels. It's the project level. That would be typically the opinion of a client. They have many assumptions made, so the flexibility is reduced. And then it's the agency level. That would be the New Medium opinion, or could also be Eric's opinion. And Usually there will be some assumptions made, but there will be room for flexibility within those assumptions to accommodate the project level flexibility. And then you have the framework level, which is the opinions of Drupal or Drupal Commerce, for example, which are frameworks with few assumptions made as to how you're going to use it. These kinds of distinctions are also often called opinionated versus non-opinionated. So what New Medium wants to do here is to contribute to the framework in such a way that we can apply the level of flexibility that they want to each project, but also at the same time to all of their projects. And they would want to contribute to this flexibility to ensure that their opinion is covered, while making sure the agency level and project level of types of assumptions can be implemented in a good way. And one such example could be that one wants to be able to enforce a way to display the currency symbol across a range of projects. That would be typically a New Medium level. Or one also has to have the discipline and thoughtfulness to make it possible to override these assumptions made. And this is also sort of an exercise in identifying customizations that an agency can benefit of making an agency opinion or type of flexibility. And that's why Eric and New Medium tries to evaluate every project to identify different wishes from the client and the customizations that they made along the way. That might be a good idea to adopt as an agency-wide opinion. For example, could be a very clever thing done in a form alter that they might want to add to a module that all of their projects use. And in that process, they also might want to or can be able to identify shortcomings or even bugs in the framework itself, for example, Drupal or Drupal Commerce, that they can contribute back. And one interesting thing about opinions and flexibility is that when they become available, they might get adopted by more people. And one such example is the module layout builder restrictions, which historically came from the opinion that New Medium had about the blocks being available for editors. And now this is one of the most popular modules in the layout builder ecosystem, actually. And the other cultural solution is what Eric calls open source by force. This does not sound so polite since there's force involved, but it relates to changing an attitude within several areas. Now, typical skepticism against open source by force would be that making code open source creates a whole lot of extra work. It's slower, harder, and more overhead to update a module when it's open source. I cannot make the code public before it's perfect. Very typical to think that. Now, out of these opinions, none of them are true in Eric's opinion. The important way to think about this is open sourcing agency code is just a way to create the in-house modules of an agency. So to debunk the myths here, making code open source create the same amount of work as having an in-house module, and you even get hosting and issue tracking for free on Drupal.org. It requires the same amount of work updating the module as if one had it in a private repository, and making the code and the process of developing it public usually makes the code better, and it can be improved for free by others. And of course, it also generates a positive reputation for the agency. So those were the cultural solutions. We're now going to look at some of the technical solutions that Eric and his co-workers is using. And groundwork for these solutions is having a great continuous integration process. So being able to be more open source while doing tailor-made solutions, it's extremely important to have the technical foundation in place. At New Medium, they have different levels of modules and template projects that all run tests continuously, meaning in practice every day, to see if something breaks. And based on purely this, we are going to see some things that Eric highlights as something that makes them more open. Here's one positive effect. It's easier to follow patches being committed, and um, therefore also participating in the issue queue, because using composer patches to apply the patches to projects, you can see in the continuous integration system easily when they don't apply anymore, and sometimes it's because they're being committed. So you can follow the development, so to speak, of a module that way. It's also easier to maintain contrib modules that they maintain themselves. For example, when they encounter backwards incompatibility issues, which is especially helpful when dealing with modules that has only dev versions. Here's one example where a module relies on commerce shipping, which is, well, at the time was not in a stable version, and it generated an issue and patches and visibility for others on that contrib module that New Medium maintains. And then we have the issue where the patch no longer applies. By running tests and by extension also patches every day, you can easily see when the patch no longer applies and then do rerolls on issues. For example, the same day or the day after, just really quickly, since you're finding them continuously. And here is one example where they discover, and they discover ahead of deploying this to an actual client site, luckily, that a new version has made a backwards incompatible change. Running tests like this is one way to uncover that. This is an integration test. Another one is to run constructor tests for cases where they extend contrib base classes so that they know if it changes constructor signature or when it services that it now requires more services to be constructed. And lastly, Eric was really looking for it but could not find it, so this one is fabricated actually, but it's another example of running tests and code analysis on your own contrib modules. So here is a PHP stand configuration file that you can use to identify deprecations for Drupal 9, and that's one example, and also new coding standard changes and just plain test failures. So what have they learned on this journey? Well, being a responsible agency, one wants to maintain a site after actually delivering. Making tailor-made solution indicates a partnership and not a delivery. And making sure upgrades can be applied and being on top of issues that will appear is good for business, but also contributes to open source. Creating a culture within the company that makes it the natural workflow to be more open is a key component. And culture can be about policy, but it is mostly about people. And having a natural structure across projects that makes it easy and even beneficial to contribute back to the project is something one might strive to achieve. And evaluating what one can learn across projects within the agency and even identify parts that can be learned and adopted by others is something that is both good for business and for open source. And within the technical solutions, the most important thing is to have automated processes to make sure one can keep patches up to date. Having custom or agency-specific modules compatible with new versions of open source projects as well. And at New Medium, they use, among other tools, GitHub Actions, Travis CI, and Violins to automate deployments, tests, and updates. There are also a range of other tools for this. And with that, I think I speak for Eric when I say that the agency New Medium has benefited in all of the following areas for actively trying to be more open source, more in-depth knowledge of the projects that they are using, a fun, tingly feeling when more patches are being committed to projects that they use, and better reputation and more visibility within the community, and a growing tool set of automated tools to make the future even easier, and more profitable business and better quality code. So I think I am just out of time. So if you have any questions or comments or want to shoot me an email about something, here are my details, and I will pass pass this along to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. So I will quickly share our slides. Hope you can see them. All right. So thank you very much. We're now starting the second session where we want to talk about our implementation of a headless corporate website with an integrated B2C shop, which we based on Drupal and Magento. We are Kai, myself, I'm a project manager, worked on the project as Scrum Master, project manager, and partly responsible for testing. And Roman, who will quickly introduce himself.
Yeah, hello, I'm Roman. I was one of the backend developer for this project.
All right, we both work for Unique, which is a digital full-service agency based in Switzerland, but also offices in Poland and Germany. So what do we want to talk about? This is a case study where we want to highlight the case salts.ch. So we want to quickly show you the business case with the main requirements, the application components, so the architecture, some implementation details, definitely not all of them in a 20-minute session, but some that we found worthwhile talking about. And at the end, we want to give you a short demo of the website, outlook, and questions if we have time. So let's jump into the business case of salts.ch. The business case of the website is about Swiss Saltworks. The name already implies it. It's really about salt in Switzerland. So Swiss Saltworks is responsible for everything that has to do with salt in Switzerland. So the production inside of Switzerland of salt, but also the import from foreign countries, the distribution of salt. This is especially important if you look in the image on the right, that it's not only the salt that you eat, but also the one that is put on streets in the winter or into some production processes. Apart from this more operational parts, there's also the need for information towards the public. We have a shop on the website we will talk about. And there's also one part about experiences. So that means that you can visit physical destinations where the salt is produced and stored. And this is also a part of the website. So we try to put the requirements into real high-level requirements so you can comprehend that in a short time. So the first one is shop and content together on one website. The editorial experience and flexibility, and the third one is the technical extensibility. Roman will now talk about the architecture and some details towards these requirements in the next slides.
Okay, thanks, Kai. Yeah, on the next slide, we see that we have two systems where content is created from. We have a Drupal and a Magento. Magento uses the import to get data from SAP. And we have a gateway which uses Apollo, and of course a front end that uses Vue.js with Next and Nginx as proxy in front of all of these. All this is wrapped into a Kubernetes cluster. Overall, we have 3 environments, like usual, I think, develop, integration, and production. And every system in these environments are separate pods for Drupal, for Magento, for the gateway, and so on. And we have some, call it service pods for things like crons and Magento Drupal import, or the import for Magento that updates the products into stock, and for Drush commands and so on. Okay, now some words about the gateway. we use Apollo for this. We have to connect the shop and the content. So this is one of the main responsibilities of the gateway, and also we use it for routing, for example, domain redirects, to put together the two site searches. We have one site that combines the search results of Magento and Drupal for authentication and for language detection. Okay, so the next slides are clustered according our main requirements. So we start with the we had the shop and the content, now the editorial flexibility. For us, it was important to generate several layouts. We used a module based on the layout builder and paragraphs. We created different layouts like 50-50 and one column, or 20-50-20 or 25-50-25. And we wrote a module to restrict some paragraphs for some layouts. For example, you can't put in a web form on a 50-50 layout because it breaks it. It's only possible to put it in a 100, one column layout. Okay. One other requirement was that we need some subsites, let's call it subsites, with their own brands and destinations, where brands are product brands, product categories, and the destinations are physical locations that Kai mentioned before, like a museum or something like that about salt. We have vocabularies for this. Each brand and each destination is a term that have their own look and feel, and the most important, have different submenu trees. Every submenu tree has an entry point that is customizable by the editor, and these submenus are added to the menu automatically. And to choose a term for a brand or destination in a node will add this menu tree automatically. So we had to decide which way we want to go. We needed a query language that works very well with Drupal 8. We choose GraphQL, and we use the fourth version of this module for Drupal. We choose this over the third version because it's more flexible. You have to do much more by yourself, but it's way more flexible in terms of schemas. For example, we use compose schemas for every feature. Set your own field names, write your own resolvers and mutations. So we use the fourth version. And now I will show you some examples how to query data with some or from some or custom data providers. Let's start with the routing query. This is by far the most important, I think. We have for the response, we have three types. Entity, which gives back an entity interface that can queried, which type can be queried separately. For example, on the left side, you see a salt story entry page that is a node type. And on the right side, you see the information. There are many more, but I had to keep the example simple. Then we have redirects. For example, when you use URL aliases and use something like node / and a number, then it redirects you to the correct URL alias. And of course, an error like 404 that gives back a code and a normal error message. And we have some language handling, as you can see. Yeah, then we have the search. This based on the search API is a migration of the search API for GraphQL 3. You see the arguments, the index, the full text, language range, and so on. And the aggregation for this search and the search from Magento is done in the gateway that I mentioned before. Also, we needed some web forms. We wrote a system that is based on web forms, the module, of course, and is capable of handling all types of elements. Generic mutations are added to submit every of these web forms. And we have error handling in front-end and in Drupal. So validating the inputs are done in the front end, but also when you send the mutation, it's also handled in Drupal and sent back the wrong fields and error message. The last of the many things of the features we implemented was responsive image responsive image output that is based on the responsive image styles module that is in core. And on the left side, you can see the field we're querying is header image, and we have a fallback and we have sources. The fallback is on the right side, a simple image with an image style, and the sources are source sets. And for every defined breakpoint in the responsive image styles module, style resize is given. Okay, now I want to give back to Kai for the demo and the outlook.
All right, thank you very much for the technical details. We recorded some videos that we would like to show to you, that you get a feeling of the website, how it looks in the end, and how different parts of the website behave. So you can see here the main page with some normal modules or paragraphs like teasers. Here also some product teasers, which already shows the connection between content and shop elements, some more teaser styles, teasers to some of the brands, and like you can see also shops and other stuff that you normally find on Drupal websites like events. In the next video, we want to show you some of the brands websites or subsites that we talked about earlier. So here we are at the general part of the website, the Swiss SaltWorks. But if we go further down, we have teasers for the different brands and destinations. So we will click on one for Reosal, which is a brand. And here you can see that the styling is now changed a little bit, that you see that you are on the brand side, but it's still in the CI/CD of Swiss SaltWorks. You see that the accent colors have changed, and also the menu structure is different and independent from the main site. In the last video, we want to give you a short glimpse of the shop. So you can see here the landing page or the overview page of all products. So the product teasers are listed with load more functionality, with quick add to cart buttons, and so on and so forth, like you know from shop systems. This is all filterable via the facets that we get from SAP and Magento. Those are handled, given to us via the gateway, and we can use them for filtering. There's also a complete checkout process, but we don't want to go that much into detail here. So what's next? What are we working on with this platform? What you saw is the B2C shop. We are currently working on the B2B shop, which should also be integrated into this architecture. We have integration of new services and features for the shop part and also for the Drupal part. One thing that is really exciting, especially for technical people, is the integration of IoT devices. So we are currently working on integrating sensors that are placed in big silos where the salt for the streets is stored. And with these sensors, the Swiss salt work can measure how much salt is left and when they need to refill it. And this is where a headless architecture really comes handy to integrate such services and devices. We also have new brand integrations into the ecosystems, and yeah, much more cool features coming. We also won the second prize for technology in the Swiss Splash Awards, which the team is proud of, so I quickly wanted to mention it. Yeah, so that's basically our session. Thank you very much for listening. I think we have a little bit time for Q&A for us and also for Eric if there are questions for him. Just let us know in the chat. There's a question from Anya that the site is impressively fast. Thank you very much. Is it due to the decoupled front end? Roman, can you say something about that? We're both not front end people, but maybe you can answer it.
Yeah, of course. I think that's the main reason because yeah, it's not much to load when it's done. So yeah, it's one of the main reasons.
Yeah. Maybe if you want more information on the front end technology and the gateway, you can reach out to us and we can connect you to our front end developers, which are in the audience maybe, but not here as presenters. Are there any other questions, like mentioned, maybe also for Eric, if you have any questions for him? Maybe one point from our side that a question we got multiple times, why we did not use Drupal Commerce for this, why there is Magento in the system. So this was basically a requirement from the customer because of the connection to SAP. And this gave us the challenge and the opportunity, both, to be honest, to integrate Magento with Drupal in this headless scenario, which was new to us, but at the end was a great experience in terms of flexibility and new architecture to also do this with Magento. So, no more questions in the queue?
No more questions to see.
So let's wait a few seconds if there's anything coming in.
Yeah.
If not, feel free, or if some questions come up, just feel free to contact us. Yeah, you can find us around also tomorrow or via our names that were on the first slides. All right, then I think we finished this session. Thank you very much for attending.
We have a question from Christoph. Can you show the Magento poll results?
Sure. I hope you can see them now. I clicked the button share results. So we had 15 votes, 20% yes, they integrated Magento, 33% no, 13% what is Magento, and the majority of people took the fun answer, oh, no Magento, we don't want to use it. All right, I think that's a good end to the session. Thank you very much for listening and see you around.
Yep, see you.